Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do do do. May we listen for that sweet spot with all our heart.
47 Trybe edition. We are here with a great friend and sister, the praying mantis themselves. Welcome to the space, Jackie.
Welcome, welcome.
So, Jackie and myself have known each other for a little while now, and we've climbed over a few rocks, as in most relationships. Mm-hmm. And the mountain that you get to is always worth the outlook that you see, I think. It's funny doing these interviews, you tend to get a more intimate knowledge of somebody. I think it doesn't really matter how long you know that person. So we'll just jump right into it. The first question being, what was it that first informed you that you were a woman?
Okay, so whenever, let's see, how old was I? I don't know how old I was, but I was with my cousin and my sibling, and they were 5 and 6 years younger than me, respectively. And up until that point, I still very much felt like one of the kids, right? So I would take baths with them, I would shower, I would change with them, which is what we were doing that day. We were changing together because we were going to go swimming. And one of my cousins said to me, "You look like a woman down there." And so I looked in the mirror, and sure enough, I did look like a woman down there. And I wasn't sad. I remember that specifically. I was not sad. But I definitely felt like things slowed down. Like time slowed down just for a second so that it could make space for this very big news. So I could receive this very big news. So yeah.
So do you feel as though that transition of being told by, I guess, society or your peers that was something that you're beginning to resemble, whatever that looks like? Do you feel as though it was only related to your body, or was it related to more energetic, emotional messaging, or was it more just aesthetic messaging based around how you appeared?
Right. So I think slowly but surely I was starting to step into that energetic affiliation with womanhood. And I hadn't realized it. I hadn't been conscious of it. And so having someone point out to me that I look like a woman sort of connected a lot of those dots for me. Like, it was really big news. I looked in the mirror and I was like, okay, like, I'm a woman. I look like a woman. Therefore, I am a woman.
And what did that look or feel like for you besides not being able to, like, maybe change or take baths with your cousins anymore?
Mm-hmm. So I just think that there was kind of a loss of innocence, or sort of like a blending in with my environment, that when I think back to my childhood, that's a huge characteristic of that. of just sort of being one with everything. And so once I became more differentiated, I became a woman. I think that I really started to have this sort of like individual experience of everything and started to really construct an identity that was very separate from people around me.
Do you still feel like that?
I feel like I'm actively working back. I feel like I'm actively working back to a state of like being more blended in a way and sort of less individualized.
Back to your child or back to something that you felt at that time, but something new?
That, something new. Yeah, I feel like something was kind of lost whenever I started to really explore what does it mean to be a woman. So I'm trying to get that back. But in the same way, you know, I can never go back. So I'm trying to like also work with what's now here.
Yeah. What was if there was any inspirations for beginning that journey of trying to receive that back?
Yeah, just the isolation that comes from feeling like you are your own fragment and sort of like the pressure that no one could ever live up to by being like an individual force in this universe.
Yeah. Are there any practices that you found that are helpful for returning back to that?
Meditation, first and foremost, and a lot of like spiritual research. So
Like
trying to find
Wikipedia, right?
huh?
Like Wikipedia, right?
Yes, and Reddit and Facebook. No, but yeah, so trying to find guides. I think I don't yet have really access to in-person guides. So I found a lot of my guides through books, like, you know, Women Who Run with the Wolves is a really good one. Be Here Now, The Power of Now, A New Earth. So just kind of like finding spiritual messages that resonate with me that talk about, you know, coming back to like a sense that you are connected with people, even though you are your own unique manifestation of all of that. Yeah,
So
definitely need a guidebook though.
So is it fair to say like some of these practices helping you revitalize your relationship to the archetypal divine feminine energy in a sense?
Oh, that's a good question. So I haven't really thought about it in those terms. A lot of the stuff, okay, so there's the one book I talk about, and it very much talks about the divine, specifically the wild woman. And that's very archetypal. But a lot of other spirituality books that I do resonate with sort of go beyond that polarity of masculine and feminine. But it's been interesting thinking about these questions and trying to understand like what about that polarity do I want to preserve in me? Like what do I want to cultivate and nurture? And then what must go?
Yeah, for sure. So have you felt like that revival or return to a more, I guess, like holistic spirit as opposed to the more individual fragmented version? is it more helpful for you to look beyond the polarity? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I do feel I experience moments of it where, I'm talking to someone and I get this like flash or this sense that I can kind of see behind them, this aliveness. And it does, in my experience, transcend those polarities, and it matches something inside of me that also transcends those polarities. But I am a person. I'm having a person experience. And so as I navigate this earth, I do think it's helpful to think about these polarities and ways that it does enrich this person experience that we're having.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So not just being like, oh well, we're all one, but there's truth in that, but also acknowledging, the person experience and everything that comes with that. What has your relationship with nature been like recently or throughout your life, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is an easy question. Nature really brings me back to myself. And I think about it kind of like if you're in nature versus not being in nature. So being in nature versus not being in nature is the difference between being surrounded by something that's living, so being surrounded by life on all sides of you, versus being surrounded by mostly inanimate objects. And I just think it's impossible not to be affected by that either way. What's that phenomenon that's like things always go from a higher concentration to a lower concentration? So it's not osmosis. It's what is it? It's not homeostasis. It's something like that. But that's a lot how I think about nature. Is like this aliveness. When you're in it, it's the high concentration. It's surrounding you, and it's going to enter you because you have like a lower concentration of it compared to it. Whereas, in the city life, as a city dweller, it's kind of the reverse effect sometimes. If you're surrounded by like inanimate materials, walls, bookshelves, chairs, you are the highest concentration of life in that scenario. So it's revitalizing, is all that to say it's revitalizing. And I mean, I think it also contains the masculine and the feminine within it. So I know a lot of people think about nature as being feminine, but I see a lot of those elements inside of it. Like there's the hunt, which is super masculine. There's like the blazing heat sometimes, things like that. So, I think about the masculine and the feminine and how like both are needed for the creative process. And what is life if not creativity expressed? So my experience with it in that way has been that whenever I am writing a poem or working on any other creative act, and if I feel like I'm at a dead end, there's been multiple occasions where I'll go into nature, and usually I have to spend about one night as the rule. But I'll go in nature and then I'll come out and like, I don't know, it's just stuff will come to me in like a creative fashion. And I think all of that's connected.
Yeah. I think that's super interesting about, I feel as though for any divine embodiment, it has to have divine masculine, divine feminine energies, or else it's not balanced. And really, it can't express itself because they're not able to express without each other. And I feel like that's one of the important parts about this project is trying to understand these concepts beyond how limited both our language and our understanding of these concepts even are. Just to dive deeper into a more holistic and complete understanding of these different polarities. I like metaphors a lot too. So when you were talking about the city, the difference between the city and nature, and like the concentrations of life force, it made me think a lot about the difference between LSD and mushrooms, and how mushrooms is probably billions of years old and probably timeless. The consciousness of mushrooms is probably timeless, but technically it's one of the first things to fruit on this planet. And so it has quite literally is programmed with all this life force energy of all the experiences, basically the whole planet in a sense. And LSD is such a new invention that it's like the diffusion, like you were talking about, it's just a more complete vibration because it has so much more experience programmed into it. And then how that relates back to nature, I wanted to ask you, like, do you feel in your body when you go into nature, can you feel different aspects of yourself that are in alignment or out of alignment, or what nature is calling you to do more so than in the city?
I think so. The city kind of calls me to succeed or to like be somebody, to stand out, to like work hard in these very specific ways. Whereas nature is kind of asking me for the exact opposite. It's telling me to do nothing. And that's kind of success in that scenario, in that context. So in my body, I can never flip the switch right away. Whenever I step into these natural spaces, I'm still very like oriented and fixated on a lot of, city things. And so it takes some time to really let go of that and just kind of let that energy sort of diffuse into me. It's like a slow process. But
have you ever played it out?
Yeah. The longer I'm in nature, the more it can take effect on my body and the more at peace I start to feel. And it's not just like a sleepful peace, like I don't want to go to sleep, but it's very energizing, like a very energizing peace. And a lot more creative, honestly.
Has it assisted you on your healing journey?
Very much so. What's up?
I was just going to say, just the feeling of like diffusion and creativity, or what in particular?
So more just grounding back into my form. I think that for me, if I could sum up healing, it would be like really feeling into my body. And so kind of like beyond mental constructs and really re-inhabiting my form. feeling into the pain that's there, feeling into the joy that's there, and just like, yeah, really re-inhabiting my body, which has something to do with balance for sure, of these masculine and feminine energies. And I'm still trying to figure all of that out.
Let me know when you do.
Okay, maybe we can get there with this conversation. Maybe we'll figure it all out.
How was this process, I guess, like in relationship to your peers? However you really want to take that question, like, you know, whether you want to start from a young age or whether you want to talk about it from, you know, stepping into this realization. Just your relationship with your peers and the people around you and the positive or negative reinforcement that you received and how that sort of, you know, influenced you.
Right. So are you speaking about relationship between my masculine and my feminine and how that's received by them?
I guess just, just like your healing journey in general, just coming into more like unapologetically you, like I'm gonna do what I need to do, and then how that was sort of received.
Right. Well, yeah, I think the first bit of my healing journey was really isolating, just because I felt very unrelatable to a lot of my peers. I was dealing with a lot of really heavy energies that had stuck around and really made a home in my body and really cultivated themselves. And so I reached a breaking point with it where something had to be done, because, you know, I couldn't, like, I did not want to be the landlord to these tenants anymore. Like, they had to go. And so I started my healing journey kind of just at that breaking point. And during it, I just felt like I couldn't really talk to anyone about what was going on, just because it was so beyond the purview of like anything that had words, and like anything that, I don't know. Yeah, I just felt like it was something I had to do on my own for a bit. And as I started to like dissipate the more intense energies and really sort things out and organize and release, then I started really opening up to people about what was going on, what I was doing. And a lot of people were supportive, and a lot of people, well, I'll say some people were not. And so far as they like took me doing what I had to do for myself, they took it personally. And so during this process, I mean, relationships were lost, but that's how it needed to be.
Yeah. Were you sort of isolating because you felt like you might be a burden on those people around you with a lot of the more heavier stuff? Or was it just more like you felt like they didn't have anything for you at that time?
It was a little bit of both. I definitely didn't want to be a burden, but at the same time, I sort of had this mentality of no one could possibly understand this pain, or understand like what it's like to try to carry this. And so it was definitely a combination that, yeah.
For me, that feeling has been actually super like liberating on my journey, because I can definitely relate. And then for me, it also relates to balancing of the polarities. On the one hand, accepting that quite literally, nobody will ever understand what we've gone through and what we feel. And we're the only one who has to deal with it at the end of the day. And we're the only one capable of holding that in that way. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we can still reach out and like connect with each other. It's kind of like that balancing act. Like I definitely isolated myself, but then the freedom to be like, realize that internally and then come out, that was super important to balancing. So I wasn't just mopey as shit for my whole life. You know?
Yeah.
So what has been some of the things that have helped you sort of like balance that within yourself? Like being able to then come out a little bit and start connecting with people again, even if others you had to push away or end the relationship. What helped you sort of achieve that balance of being able to come out?
I think it was sort of like allowing myself really concentrated times of me doing the work. So how you were saying, like, there's some work that no one can do for you. You have to do for yourself. And that's kind of like also the beautiful part of it, because you step into your own and in a way that no one can do for you. Right. So I still do this. I just allow myself to have like a whole day on the couch if I need to really just feel and accept and explore. And that's like my time, you know. I don't like try to put on a happy face for anyone. I don't like make plans on those days. And those days are so deeply healing for me. On the contrary, in terms of like reaching out, I do have a lot of like supports in place. Like I've got my one person that I can like talk to anything about, I can talk to him about anything, which is my brother. I've got my therapist. And so I put a lot of emotional labor, for lack of a better word, on those support systems. And in terms of like checking in with other people about this process, I feel like maybe I'm still not balanced in those ways, just because another part of my process is like making room for like joy as well. So this healing process, you know, I don't want to like put myself under construction and say that, you know, I've got a year and I'll be healed, or like 2 years. And until then, it's just like all work, I'm on my grind all the time, healing. I think I realized like it does not work like that. And that this is, much to my disappointment, but that this is a lifelong process. And so, you know, making space for joy along that process. And I feel like that's where other people come in to me. And so maybe that's not entirely balanced yet. But I still feel like, yeah, I kind of keep my shadow to myself a lot.
What does make you happy? What helps you find joy?
Laughing, deep belly laughs. And it's actually interesting because I was thinking about what womanhood is, or like what my journey into womanhood is. And through that, I was thinking about like, you know, what feels like good about being a woman, and like what feels like medicine and what feels sacred. And so I was able to kind of like understand through those questions and reflections, like what about being a woman makes me happy. And it's kind of complicated, or it was really hard, because, you know, when I think about what does it mean to be a woman, I've got like, it's really hard to tease apart like the difference between cultural definitions of womanhood and then like this more universal essence.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the universal essence, like everyone takes on and they make their own, but it's something that's not defined outside of itself. And so I've been kind of like, in terms of happiness, like it's really tied to that universal essence. So like, what are these gravities inside of me? Like, where do I get pulled? And I very much get pulled towards the earth. Like I want to touch dirt. I want to pick blueberries. I want to just like lay in the mud on my belly and like roll around in it. And just like slowing down so deeply that I can just feel like the moon on my skin. Like slowing down that deep.
Get moon burned.
Yeah. Turning my skin blue from the moon and the blueberries. But yeah, so I think my feminine essence has a lot to do with what makes me happy.
Wow. I feel like we just went on a little joy journey real quick. Like
Yeah.
rolling around in the mud, blueberry, all the imagery was just gold. I was right there with you. I was like, this sounds fun as shit.
Yeah.
We could even eat some mud while we're at it.
Oh,
Get that B12.
For sure.
What do you feel keeps you from being happy at this moment? Or makes it more difficult?
Maybe like the strivings of like ambitions.
And when you say ambition, like,
yeah, like all the stuff, all the expectations that I place on myself. Like I need to study for this test. I need to do this. I need to do that. I feel like that those create like tension in my body, which is sort of the opposite of these like sort of like do nothing releases that I was talking about just now. That I don't know. I think maybe that comes back to a lack of balance between the masculine and the feminine, because I do think like masculinity does have a lot of ambition to it and a lot of like bringing things forth, making things happen. But I feel like a little off balanced with all of that.
have you ever had times or weeks or when you feel as though those two energies were in perfect equilibrium, as in like your ambition wasn't causing tension in your body, but you were at the same time able to take time for yourself to slow down?
Yeah, no. I can't think of a time in which that's the case.
Well, sorry guys, you're gonna have to figure that shit out on your own. So.
Yeah.
What is your vision for a more balanced and harmonious world?
Okay. So this was really tied to my ideas of my core values. So maybe I could talk about that first.
Yeah.
So my core values, it's really simple. It's just that everyone should feel safe and everyone should feel loved. So any other values that I have, human rights, radical honesty, like environmental rights, all of that just kind of like orbit around these core values.
Yeah.
And so I just think about the fact that like all the atrocious things that people do or that are happening collectively in the world, I think all of that can be tied back to self-hate on a very individual level. Because, if you hate yourself, you're going to be searching for something to fill that hate, to like fix that hate, whether it's money or power or combination thereof. And you're going to do whatever it takes to sort of fill this darkness with something. And same with safety. So if you feel threatened, you're going to brutalize people. You're going to lock them up. You're going to annihilate them if you don't feel safe in your own body, whether or not they're really a threat. So my harmonious world is one in which everyone feels safe and loved. And I think it starts at an individual level, like that's the work of the individual. But then once you get to that place of self-love, you can start to like help other people find that as well.
Do you feel as though you speak on these things from personal experience, like as you began your journey, like have you began to see sort of your microcosm change based on your individual journey?
Yes, definitely. Self-love is the hardest thing, the hardest spiritual, like psychological, any which way path I have ever walked on. But, as it became less abstract and more concrete for me, I really did start seeing shifts in my perception of the world. And feeling more safe. Like a lot of things that felt threatening to me sort of shifted and like, okay, so there's a lot to it, but basically like when I first started out with this practice of self-love, it was very abstract. Like I would just look in the mirror, like I knew I was miserable, right? But I would look in the mirror and I would see my reflection and I would say, I love you, like over and over again. And nothing would happen. And
Wait, you mean unicorns and rainbows didn't pop out of your ass?
no,
Fuck.
much to my dismay. And so it was, okay, so the best way I can describe it. Whenever you are looking out with your eyeballs at the world, that's like where your attention is at. You're looking at your environment. And so in the same way that like perceptive attention is working, if you like turn that in on yourself, just like swivel it and turn that in on yourself, like close your eyes, obviously. And it's like, it's dark in there. And you'll start to like notice a lot of what's going on, like your shadow, you'll meet your shadow. And just for me, the experience was seeing like, okay, this is my pain and I've been trying to like fix it externally, but it's an internal issue. So how do I love this? Because that's what self-love is. It's loving even the parts that feel unlovable, like you hate those parts, you don't love them, but how do you love them so you have full self-love?
Yeah.
And so it's literally just like shouting. You feel like you're shouting into the darkness, like, I love you, over and over. And slowly but surely, it became more concrete, those practices, and it's still very much a practice, but through that, I started to see concrete shifts in what I'm talking about. And I did start to like look around at like a lot of the shit that's going on. And I'm just like, this person, this very powerful, wealthy person, like hates their own guts more than anything. It feels very obvious to me.
Their own reptilian, alien guts, but that's not or there. Yeah. For me, I love the affirmation. I like to yell into the abyss, darkness, shadow side. It's fucking lit, yum yum sauce. At all parts of me that are like, it's not lit. I'm like, no, it's fucking lit. It's fucking lit. I definitely resonate with that practice, and also just being like, I love you, or like, you open your eyes. Did anything change? Nope. Did anything happen? Nope. The only thing is just keep with that intention of doing it, and things begin to slowly happen. It's magic, but it's not like, I don't know. People are like, I can't meditate. I'm like, well, I think the problem is that you don't want to be able to meditate, because you can define it however you want. The only thing that needs to remain constant is your willingness and your desire to do something. So I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, my shadow has yet to shout back at me, but I'm sure it will happen one day.
Oh, that shit happens all the time to me. Well, I think we got some pretty good stuff. We got some gold going on here. Any more gems you want to drop on them?
I was thinking about, because I have a really hard time with understanding what masculinity is, like defining that. Like, you heard me talk about my womanhood. That kind of just flowed once I was able to like tease back those cultural definitions and like shed those a little bit. But with masculinity, I have conversations with people and I'm like, so what is masculinity if it's not toxic masculinity? Like, it's kind of hard sometimes for me to understand what's masculinity without toxicity. And so like, what's good about it? Like, what feels good? And I'm still kind of working on that question. And I think I'm going to have to just feel into myself, like, about what's already there and what feels good. But I thought about birth. So the process of birthing a child, for example, and how like contained within it is the masculine and the feminine for me. So if the feminine is like creative potential and the masculine is like bringing things forth, I feel like that whole process of birthing creates that circle within it. And that was kind of, that kind of gave me hope in a way about, this is a thing I want to balance. This is a thing I want in me. It's a necessary thing. And I just have to figure out what it is exactly. So that's all.
Facts. I wrote something the other day kind of along those lines. I think birth is a great example of the balance and what we can all strive towards in a certain sense. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I'm trying to hermaphrodize and impregnate myself. No, but I thought about like a bicycle. Like if the feminine rides and propels the bicycle, everybody like almost like perceives the feminine as doing everything, and then for me the masculine is that which maintains the bicycle. And you might not notice it if the job is done correctly, but then again, what you can notice is the absence of a bike that's falling apart. And then like turning that within, it's kind of like, I think sometimes it can be a little difficult to perceive those aspects of everything in which keep things running smoothly and maintain these very basic aspects of ourselves. That's just how I kind of understand it. But you know me, I love mechanics and metaphors. So
yeah, that's interesting. So you're thinking more like the force that's propelling it is feminine, is how you would perceive that.
I would.
Interesting. See, I would, in my understanding of it, it would kind of be the opposite. But that's interesting.
Thank you so much for being with us. You know, big shouts to the Most High for walking with us. And as always, it's great to speak and heal and communicate with you.
Yes. Thank you.
Much love.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do do do. May we listen for that sweet spot with all our heart.